The council chamber fell silent as the holographic display showed another world dying. 3 billion souls had lived on Kelmar Prime yesterday. Today, nothing remained but ash, and the skeletal remains of cities picked clean by the swarm. Ambassador Min-Jae Park stood at the human delegation's platform, watching the alien representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. 200 years of peaceful cooperation had made them soft. They had forgotten that the universe could be cruel. The Krathek swarm has now consumed 5 worlds in 3 months, Council Speaker Thralaxis announced, his mandibles clicking in what passed for concern among his insectoid species. We must respond with appropriate diplomatic measures and defensive positioning. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. Diplomatic measures. Defensive positioning. These beings had no idea what they were facing. Speaker Thralaxis, if I may address the council, Min-Jae said, his voice calm despite the frustration burning in his chest. The speaker's compound eyes focused on him. The human delegation may speak. Min-Jae activated his own display, pulling up documents that were older than most species in this chamber. Earth maintains extensive records of similar threats from our own history. We have protocols, strategies, and tactical frameworks specifically designed for dealing with parasitic swarm entities that cannot be reasoned with. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Several delegates made sounds that their translators rendered as polite laughter. Ambassador Park, said Councillor Vexren, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline form, with all respect to humanity's colorful past, we are discussing a modern crisis. Your species' primitive conflicts hardly seem relevant to contemporary galactic defense. Min-Jae felt his hands grip the podium edge. Primitive conflicts. If only they knew. Our conflicts taught us hard lessons, he said carefully. We learned how to fight enemies who show no mercy, who take no prisoners, who cannot be negotiated with. The Krathek swarm displays all these characteristics. More laughter, though this time it carried an edge of condescension. Humanity has been a valued member of the Galactic Council for 2 centuries, Thralaxis said, his tone suggesting he was speaking to a child. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but warfare has evolved far beyond your old Earth battles. We have honor codes, engagement protocols, rules that civilized species follow. The swarm doesn't care about your rules, Min-Jae said quietly. In the back of the chamber, archival keeper Velmora stirred. She was ancient even by galactic standards, her species having achieved spaceflight when most others were still crawling in primordial oceans. Her 4 eyes studied Min-Jae with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Speaker, if I may. Velmora's voice creaked like old wood. The oldest archives do contain references to humanity's unique approach to warfare. There are warnings in texts that predate the current council by millennia. Thralaxis waved a dismissive claw. Those documents contain numerous translation errors and cultural misunderstandings. Surely you don't suggest we base galactic policy on ancient folklore? Velmora's tentacles coiled tighter around her floating platform, but she said nothing more. Min-Jae tried one more time. I'm requesting permission to consult with Earth's military historians and strategic command. We have information that could save lives. Ambassador Park, Councillor Vexren said, his crystalline body pulsing with what the translator rendered as exasperation. Humanity's peaceful nature is well documented. You run museums, cultural centers, and educational programs about your past. You've been model citizens, artists, and philosophers. We don't need history lessons. We need practical solutions. Our peaceful nature is a choice, Min-Jae said, his voice harder now. Not our natural state. The laughter was louder this time. Several delegates exchanged looks that suggested they thought the human ambassador was having some kind of breakdown. Thralaxis brought the chamber to order. We will proceed with conventional defensive measures. Our combined fleet will establish a protective perimeter around vulnerable systems. The Krithek will be contained, and negotiations will be attempted through all standard channels. They won't negotiate, Minjay said. They can't. It's not in their nature. That remains to be seen, Thralxis replied firmly. We are a civilized galaxy, Ambassador Park. We don't resort to barbarism simply because we face a difficult opponent. Minjay looked around the chamber at all the species represented there. Good people, all of them. Kind, decent, evolved beings who had built a society based on mutual respect and peaceful cooperation. They had created something beautiful, something humanity had desperately wanted to be part of when they first reached the stars, and it was going to get them all killed. I formally request that this warning be entered into the official record, Minjay said. Humanity has experience with this type of threat. We have protocols in place. We know what must be done. Your objection is noted, Thralxis said, clearly ready to move on. As the council began debating defensive fleet positions and diplomatic approach vectors, Minjay sat down heavily in his seat. His aide, a young woman named Sujin Huang, who served as their military liaison, leaned close. They won't listen, she whispered. No, Minjay agreed. They won't. Should I send word to Earth? Minjay was quiet for a long moment, watching the council argue about honor and protocols while another world died on the display screens. Not yet. They voted for conventional measures. We have to respect that. And when conventional measures fail? Minjay's expression was grim. Then we'll have no choice. As the session ended, Velmora floated past the human delegation. She paused, her ancient eyes meeting Minjay's. I read the untranslated archives, she said softly, so only he could hear. The ones written in Old Galactic, before modern filters softened the language. They speak of humans who fought wars that lasted generations, of weapons that could crack planets, of a species that spent 10,000 years learning every possible way to kill. We've changed, Minjay said. Have you? Velmora's tentacles trembled slightly. Or have you simply been trying very hard to forget? Before Minjay could answer, she drifted away, leaving him standing alone in the emptying chamber. He walked to the observation window and looked out at the peaceful station, at the hundreds of species going about their daily lives in harmony. They had built something precious here, something worth protecting. But protection sometimes required more than good intentions. Minjay pressed his hand against the cool glass and whispered to his own reflection. We tried to warn you. We wanted you to never see what we used to be. In the distance, another star system's distress beacon activated. The swarm was still hungry. Captain Sujin Huang watched the refugee ship dock with her transport vessel, her face carefully neutral despite the horror she had witnessed over the past 3 weeks. The Galactic Council's conventional defensive measures had failed spectacularly. 7 worlds now, 7 entire civilizations reduced to nothing but organic matter for the Krithek swarm to consume. The airlock opened and refugees stumbled through. Huang had seen many species in her career, but she had never seen them like this. Broken, traumatized. Eyes that had witnessed the end of everything they knew. A Velkari mother clutched her child, both of them covered in dust from their collapsed city. A group of Thenish elders supported each other, their ceremonial robes torn and stained. A young Korathi male sat against the wall, staring at nothing, his blue skin turned pale with shock. Medical teams, begin triage, Huang ordered quietly. Her crew moved efficiently, guiding refugees toward medical bays and temporary shelters. Humans had a lot of practice with refugee crises, though Huang wished they didn't. She approached the Velkari mother, kneeling to her level. You're safe now. We'll take care of you. The mother's enormous eyes focused on her. Why aren't you fighting them? Huang blinked. Ma'am? The humans, the mother said, her voice cracking. Everyone says humans are warriors, Why aren't you fighting the swarm? Other refugees were listening now, turning toward this conversation with desperate hope in their expressions. We're evacuating survivors, Huang said carefully. That's our current mission. But you could fight them, the Karathi male said, his voice hollow. The old stories say humans are the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Huang felt something twist in her chest. Those are just stories. Are they? An elderly Thenish scholar pushed forward, his three-fingered hand gripping a salvaged datapad. I studied Earth history before the swarm came. Your people fought wars for thousands of years. You built weapons that could destroy your own world. You were so good at killing each other that you nearly went extinct. The other refugees stirred, looking at Huang with new eyes. She saw it in their faces, a terrible hope born from desperation. That was a long time ago, Huang said quietly. We're different now. Our world is gone, the Velkari mother whispered. 3 billion people, my husband, my parents, my sisters, all gone in less than a day. The Council's fleets followed their honor codes and engagement rules. The swarm ignored them and killed everyone. Huang closed her eyes briefly. She had watched the battle recordings. The Galactic Defense Fleet had announced their presence, given warnings, and waited for acknowledgement before engaging. Standard procedure, civilized warfare. The Krithek had simply flowed around them and consumed the planet below. Please, the mother said, tears streaming down her face. If you know how to fight them, if you know how to stop them, why won't you? Because we've been trying to forget what we are, Huang thought. Because we wanted to be better than our history. Because we were ashamed of how good we were at killing, but she couldn't say that to these broken people. It's not my decision to make, she said instead. The Council hasn't authorized human military intervention. Then ask them, the Thenish scholar pleaded. Make them understand. More worlds are dying every week. If you wait for permission, there won't be anyone left to save. Huang stood, looking at all the faces turned toward her with desperate hope. She had joined Earth's diplomatic corps because she believed in the galactic community, in peaceful cooperation, in being something better than humanity's violent past. But watching civilizations die while following rules the enemy ignored was making her question everything. I'll speak to my superiors, she said quietly. 3 days later, Huang stood in the council chamber beside Ambassador Park, watching Councillor Thralxis review the latest casualty reports. 2 more worlds had fallen. The death toll was now in the trillions. The defensive perimeter is failing, Park said bluntly. Your fleets are trained for civilized warfare. The Krathak don't follow any rules you understand. Thralxis's mandibles clicked in agitation. What would you have us do? Abandon our principles? Become barbarians ourselves? I would have you survive, Park replied. Captain Huang has been evacuating refugees. She's heard what they're asking. They want to know why humanity isn't fighting. Because you're pacifists, Councillor Vexrin said, though his tone was less certain than before. You've spent 2 centuries promoting peace and understanding. We promoted peace because we knew what the alternative cost, Park said. We're not pacifists, Counselor. We're recovering warmongers trying desperately not to relapse. Silence fell over the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Velmora spoke from her place in the archives section. I have been researching further. The old texts describe something called total war, a human concept where entire civilizations mobilize every resource toward victory, where civilian and military targets become indistinguishable, where mercy is considered weakness and surrender is not accepted. Barbarism, Thralxis said, but his voice wavered. Survival, Park corrected. When faced with an enemy that shows no mercy, sometimes barbarism is the only answer. Huang stepped forward. The refugees I've rescued all asked the same questions. Why aren't we fighting? Why are we letting this happen? They've lost everything, and they're looking at us like we're their last hope. Because you are warriors, Thralxis said quietly. Even now, after 2 centuries of peace, everyone still knows it. Park nodded slowly. We've tried to be something else. We've tried so hard. But we can't watch the galaxy burn without acting. What are you requesting? Vexrin asked. Park pulled up a document, one that had been prepared centuries ago and locked away, hoping it would never be needed. Permission to activate Terran war protocols, full authorization for Earth's military command to deploy strategic assets and conduct operations without council oversight. The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates shouted their approval. Others recoiled in horror at the implications. Thralxis raised his claws for silence. When the chamber quieted, he looked at Park with something that might have been sadness. If we grant this, there's no going back. The galaxy will see what humanity really is. They're going to see it anyway, Park said quietly. The only question is whether they see it in time to save them. The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous, but it didn't need to be. Enough delegates had seen enough death to make the hard choice. As the authorization came through, Huang felt something shift in her chest. Relief mixed with dread. They were about to save the galaxy, and the galaxy was about to learn to fear them. Park turned to her as the chamber dissolved into chaos. Send the activation codes to Earth. Tell General Shin he has full authority. Huang nodded, her fingers already moving across her communicator. As she sent the message that would wake Earth's sleeping war machine, she thought about the Velkari mother and all the other refugees who had asked why humans weren't fighting. You're about to get your answer, she whispered. I just hope you're ready for it. The message reached Earth on a Tuesday morning, transmitted through quantum channels with the highest priority coding. General Taiyang Shin received it in his office at Terra Command, a facility that most of the galaxy believed was simply a military history museum. He read the authorization 3 times, each word burning into his mind like a brand. Then he stood, walked to his window, and looked out at the peaceful grounds below. Families walked through gardens that surrounded memorials to wars long past. Children played near statues of soldiers from conflicts that had ended centuries ago. For 200 years, Earth had been trying to forget. Trying to be better. Trying to prove that humanity could evolve beyond its violent nature. That peaceful experiment was about to end. Shin pressed the comm button on his desk. Execute Protocol Awakening. Authorization code Shin Alpha 779. This is not a drill. Across Earth and every human colony world, ancient systems came online. Dr. Jiwoo Nam was giving a lecture on galactic anthropology when the first alerts came through. She watched her students' faces change as they checked their personal devices, confusion giving way to shock, then something harder to define. Professor, one student asked, her voice shaking slightly, is it true? Are we really activating the war protocols? Jiwoo set down her teaching materials and nodded slowly. Yes. The council has authorized it. But we're not warriors anymore, another student protested. We haven't fought a real war in 2 centuries. We're scholars, artists, engineers. We're all those things, Jiwoo agreed quietly. But we're also the descendants of warriors. That doesn't go away just because we stopped practicing. Her communicator chimed with a new assignment. She was being recalled to active duty as a xenopsychologist, tasked with explaining human nature to the alien observers who would be embedded with the fleets. She looked at her students, at their young faces struggling to reconcile their peaceful lives with what was coming. Class dismissed, she said gently. Some of you will receive activation notices. Follow your training. For those who don't, your role is to maintain our civilization while others defend it. Both are equally important. As her students filed out, Jiwoo walked to the window and watched the city below begin its transformation. It was subtle at first. People walking with more purpose. Vehicles moving in organized patterns. The casual chaos of civilian life giving way to something more structured. She thought about the aliens who would witness this. They had no context for what they were about to see. For 2 centuries, humanity had shown them museums and monuments, cultural centers, and peace gardens. They thought they understood what humans were. They were about to learn how wrong they were. At the Martian Defense Complex, monuments began to empty. Weapons that aliens thought were historical displays were actually carefully maintained and ready for deployment. The ceremonial guards weren't actors playing roles. They were active duty personnel maintaining skills that everyone hoped would never be needed again. Until now. General Shin addressed Earth and all the colony worlds through a live broadcast. Billions of humans watched as their military commander stood before the flags of every nation that had ever fought, every alliance that had ever formed, every conflict that had shaped their species. For 200 years, we have tried to be something we're not, Shin began, his voice calm and steady. We pretended to be naturally peaceful. We told ourselves that our violent past was just a phase, something we had evolved beyond. We were wrong. He paused, letting the words sink in. We are not naturally peaceful. We are naturally survivors. And survival made us very, very good at war. We buried that part of ourselves, locked it away, hoped we'd never need it again. But the galaxy needs it now. On colony worlds across human space, people who had been teachers and farmers and artists yesterday were now putting on uniforms they had hoped never to wear. Every human child learned their history. Every adult maintained basic military training, even if they never expected to use it. It was tradition, they told curious aliens. Cultural preservation. It was preparation. Archival keeper Velmora had requested permission to observe the activation from Earth. She floated above the Terra Command Center, her 4 eyes taking in everything with growing horror and fascination. She watched as facilities that had been labeled as cultural heritage sites revealed their true nature. Underground bunkers opened, disgorging vehicles and weapons. Orbital platforms that aliens thought were satellites rotated to reveal weapons arrays. Ships that had been displayed in museums powered up, their hulls scarred from ancient battles, but their systems perfectly maintained. "This is impossible," she whispered to Dr. Nam, who had been assigned as her guide. "All of this was here the whole time? Hidden in plain sight?" "We didn't hide it," Jiwoo replied quietly. "We just let you see what you wanted to see. When aliens visited our war museums, they saw history. They never asked why we maintained everything in working condition. But why?" Velmora's tentacles trembled. "Why keep all of this if you were truly peaceful?" Jiwoo was quiet for a long moment, watching young soldiers board transports below. "Because we learned the hard way that sometimes peace is only possible when you're capable of war. We hoped the galaxy would never need to see this side of us, but we were always ready, just in case." The first Terran fleet assembled in orbit above Earth. Velmora stared at the ship names displayed on the tactical screens. Stalingrad, Thermopylae, Iwo Jima, Hastings, Waterloo, Gettysburg, each name a memorial to a battle, a reminder of what humanity had learned through blood and fire. "Every ship is named after a battle?" Velmora asked. "A battle we learned something from," Jiwoo corrected. "Stalingrad taught us about sacrifice and endurance. Thermopylae about the value of defensive positions. Iwo Jima about the cost of victory. We named our ships after these battles so we'd never forget the lessons they taught us." General Shin's voice came through the command center. "All ships, this is Terra Command. You are authorized to engage the Krathek swarm with extreme prejudice. Rules of engagement are suspended. Fight to win. Show no mercy to the swarm, but protect all civilian populations at any cost. Remember what we fight for." The fleet began to move, hundreds of ships sliding into formation with a precision that spoke of endless drilling. Even in peace, humanity had practiced for war. Velmora turned to Ji Woo, her ancient eyes reflecting something that might have been fear. The old archives were right, weren't they? All of it. The warnings weren't exaggerated. "No," Ji Woo said quietly. "If anything, they were understatements." "What have we done?" Velmora whispered. "What have we awakened?" Ji Woo watched the fleet disappear into faster-than-light transit, carrying with it the hope of the galaxy and the nightmares of humanity's past. "Something that should have stayed buried," she said. "Something beautiful and terrible, something the galaxy desperately needs but will never look at the same way again." Below them, Earth continued its transformation. Every human world was mobilizing. Factories retooled for military production. Transport ships became troop carriers. Civilian stations became forward operating bases. The sleeping giant was awake, and the galaxy was about to remember why, for 10,000 years before they reached the stars, humanity's greatest enemy had always been itself. Not because they were weak, but because they were so devastatingly good at war that only another human could truly challenge them. The Krethek swarm had consumed civilizations that followed rules, that valued honor, that believed in measured responses. They were about to face a species that had spent millennia learning that the only rule in war is survival, that honor is a luxury the dead can't afford, and that a measured response to an existential threat is just another word for extinction. Velmora watched the preparations and understood at last why the old warnings had been so dire. Humanity wasn't dangerous because they were violent. Every species could be violent. Humanity was dangerous because they had turned violence into an art form, a science, a philosophy, and they had spent 2 centuries trying to forget everything they learned, hoping they'd never need it again. That hope had just died, and something far more terrifying had taken its place. Admiral Hai-Rin Choi stood on the bridge of the TFS Stalingrad, watching the Krethek swarm fleet on her tactical display. Behind her, observers from 6 different alien species monitored human operations, their assignment to document and learn from humanity's approach to warfare. They were about to get an education none of them wanted. "Admiral, we're in range," her tactical officer reported. "The swarm has detected us. They're moving to engage." The alien observers leaned forward, expecting the standard protocol. Warnings would be broadcast, terms would be offered. There would be a formal exchange before any violence began. Choi had other plans. "All ships, weapons free, fire at will. Target their command nodes first. Then systematic elimination of all vessels. No warnings. No quarter." The human fleet opened fire without a single word of communication to the enemy. The Krethek swarm had never experienced this before. Every species they had encountered followed protocols, announced intentions, gave chances for withdrawal. The humans simply started killing. Plasma cannons tore through swarm vessels. Kinetic weapons punched holes through their biological armor. Missile swarms tracked every piece of debris large enough to contain life and eliminated it. "Admiral!" One of the alien observers, a Thenish military analyst named Krelvok, spoke up in shock. "You didn't issue any warnings. You didn't give them a chance to retreat." Choi didn't take her eyes off the tactical display. "Why would I?" "Because that's how civilized species conduct warfare," Krelvok protested. "You give the enemy a chance to surrender, to withdraw, to negotiate." "The Krethek don't surrender," Choi said flatly. "They don't withdraw. They don't negotiate. They consume. So we eliminate them before they can consume anyone else." The battle was brutally one-sided. The swarm fought with instinct and numbers. The humans fought with strategy and ruthless efficiency. Every move was calculated, every shot placed with precision. Nothing was wasted. "Second wave incoming," Tactical reported. "Swarm is attempting to flank us." "They're trying to use the civilian station as cover," Choi observed, watching the enemy formation shift. "They think we won't fire if civilians might be in the blast radius." The alien observers tensed. This was a test of humanity's much-vaunted morality. Choi's expression didn't change. "Evacuate the station. All personnel have 4 minutes to reach escape pods. After that, we're blowing it." "Admiral, we can't evacuate everyone in 4 minutes," her executive officer said quietly. "I know," Choi replied, her voice hard. "But if we let the swarm use it as cover, they'll kill millions more. 4 minutes. Make them count." The observers watched in horror as the evacuation order went out. Humans moved with frantic speed, grabbing everyone they could reach and throwing them toward escape pods. The station's automated systems began overloading the pods, cramming in twice their rated capacity. 3 minutes and 40 seconds later, the last pod launched. 73% evacuation rate, the executive officer reported, his voice tight. 27% still on the station. Hundreds of people. Aliens who had trusted humanity to save them. "Fire!" Choi ordered. The station exploded, taking the swarm vessels hiding behind it and the people still trapped inside. The escape pods scattered, picked up by human rescue ships within minutes. The alien observers were silent with shock. "You killed them," Krelvok finally whispered. "Your own people. You just killed them." "I saved 73%, Choi corrected, her eyes still on the battle. "If I had waited, the swarm would have used that position to destroy our fleet, then consumed every person in this system. That's 100% casualties. I chose 73% survival. In war, that's called a victory." A Velkari observer, her fur standing on end in distress, spoke up. "This is cruelty. This is murder." Choi finally turned to look at them, and they all took an involuntary step back from the ice in her eyes. "No, this is mathematics. This is the calculus of war that you've never had to learn because you're civilized. The Krithek aren't civilized. They're a disease. And you don't negotiate with a disease. You eliminate it." Over the next 2 weeks, the alien observers documented tactics that made them physically ill. Human ships used swarm vessels as shields. Human forces sacrificed their own damaged ships, ramming them into enemy formations. When the swarm took hostages, demanding the humans withdraw or watch prisoners die, Choi calculated acceptable losses and ordered the attack anyway. "You're supposed to be the heroes," a young Karathi observer said after the hostage incident, his voice breaking. "Everyone said humans would save us, but you're just as brutal as the swarm." Choi set down her tablet and looked at the young alien with something that might have been pity. "You want heroes? Heroes are for stories. This is war, real war. The kind your species hasn't fought in 1,000 years because you evolved past it. We didn't evolve past it. We just got very, very good at it." She pulled up historical records on the display. "You want to know what humanity learned in 10,000 years of war? We learned that kindness to your enemy is cruelty to your own people. We learned that mercy shown at the wrong time costs more lives than brutality shown at the right time. We learned that sometimes the right choice and the good choice aren't the same thing." "But the people on that station," the Karathi whispered. "They trusted you, and I honored that trust by making sure their deaths meant something," Choi replied, her voice softening slightly. "I made sure that 73% survived. I made sure the swarm didn't use their position to kill millions more. Every person who died on that station bought life for thousands of others. That's the trade. That's war." She stood and walked to the observation window, looking out at the debris field where the battle had raged. "You're welcome to leave if you can't stomach what victory actually costs. Your ships are in the bay. No one will stop you. But understand this, the Krithek are running now. For the first time since they arrived in this galaxy, they're actually retreating. You know why? The observers were silent. Because they finally met something more relentless than themselves. Every species they encountered before fought with honor and rules and gave them chances to adapt. We don't. We don't give chances. We don't show mercy. We just keep coming until they're gone. Admiral Choi turned back to the tactical display where new reports were coming in. The swarm was fragmenting, scattering, trying to escape. All ships, pursuit course. They don't get to run. They don't get to regroup. We end this. Admiral, her communications officer called out, we're receiving messages from swarm vessels. They're trying to communicate. It might be a surrender offer. Every alien observer looked up hopefully. Finally, the humans would show mercy. Jam their signals, Choi ordered. I don't care what they have to say. No surrender, no retreat, no mercy. They wanted total war. We're giving it to them. But Admiral, Krelvok protested, if they're trying to surrender... The 5 worlds they consumed didn't get a chance to surrender, Choi interrupted, her voice like iron. The trillions of people they killed didn't get mercy. Why should they? She looked at each of the observers in turn. This is what you asked for when you activated human war protocols. This is what we are when we stop pretending to be peaceful. If you wanted civilized warfare, you should have kept fighting them yourselves, but you couldn't win that way, could you? You needed someone willing to do what victory actually requires. The fleet jumped to pursuit vectors, hunting the fleeing swarm across 3 systems. No vessel was allowed to escape. No mercy was given. No quarter was offered. The alien observers documented it all, their reports growing more horrified with each engagement. They had asked for humanity's help. They had gotten humanity's nature instead. And somewhere deep in the archives of the Galactic Council, Velmora read their reports and updated her records with a trembling tentacle. The old warnings hadn't been wrong. They had been kind. 3 months after the activation of Terran war protocols, the Krthek swarm ceased to exist. Not defeated, not scattered, eliminated. Every hive ship destroyed, every colony node burned, every trace of their presence in the galaxy systematically erased. The human fleet returned to their home systems in silence. Ambassador Min-jae Park stood before the Galactic Council once more. But the chamber felt different now. The delegates who had laughed at his warnings 3 months ago couldn't meet his eyes. The ones who had called humanity's military history primitive now sat in uncomfortable silence. Council Speaker Thralxis was the first to speak, his mandibles clicking softly. The galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You saved us all. Did we? Park asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke. The swarm is gone, Counselor Vexrin said, though his crystalline form pulsed with uncertainty. Billions of lives were saved. Hundreds of worlds that would have fallen are now safe. And you're all terrified of us now, Park observed. I can see it in every face in this chamber. You're grateful, yes, but you're also afraid. No one denied it. In the gallery above, representatives from the refugee worlds sat in their designated section. The Velkari mother who had asked Captain Huang why humans weren't fighting sat with her surviving daughter. The Thenish scholar who had studied Earth's history clutched his data pad. They were alive because humanity had fought. They were also struggling to process what they had witnessed. There are proposals, Thralxis said carefully, from some members about establishing protocols for human military deployment, safety measures, oversight committees. You want to restrict us, Park said. It wasn't a question. Some species fear what they've seen, Thralxis admitted. The way you fight, the calculations you make, the choices you're willing to accept. It's unlike anything the galaxy has known. Park nodded slowly. He had expected this. You asked why we hid this part of ourselves. Now you know. Because we knew that once you saw what we're capable of, you'd never look at us the same way again. He activated a display showing Earth and all the human colony worlds. Ships were being decommissioned. Soldiers were returning to civilian life. The war machine was being put back to sleep. "We're already deactivating the war protocols," Park said. "General Shin has ordered a full stand-down. Within 6 months, we'll be back to our peacetime posture. Museums instead of armories. Cultural centers instead of command posts. Teachers instead of soldiers." "Just like that?" Counselor Vexrin asked skeptically. "You can simply turn it off?" "We did it before," Park replied. 200 years ago, when we joined the galactic community, we made a choice to be something better than what we were. That choice cost us. Every day, every human carries the weight of what we could be if we stopped choosing peace. But we make that choice anyway. He paused, looking around the chamber. "The difference is, now you know the truth. You know that our peace is a choice, not our nature. You know what happens when we choose differently." Dr. Ji Woo Nam had been invited to address the council about the psychological impact of the war on both humans and aliens. She stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled delegates. "I've spent the last 3 months interviewing human soldiers as they transition back to civilian life," she began. "Do you know what most of them told me? They're ashamed." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. They're ashamed of how good they were at killing. They're ashamed that the tactics came so naturally, that the calculations were so easy to make, that they didn't hesitate when hard choices needed to be made. They saved the galaxy, and they're carrying that guilt like a wound. She pulled up images of human soldiers. Young men and women who had been farmers and artists and scientists before the war. Who would go back to being those things again, but who would never forget what they had done? This is what it costs us to be what you needed. This is the price of victory. Every human who fought will carry this for the rest of their lives. In the refugee section, the Velkari mother stood. Protocol didn't permit audience participation, but no one stopped her. "My daughter is alive because of them," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "My entire world would be ashes if humanity hadn't fought. They did terrible things. They made terrible choices, but they saved us." Others stood with her. The Thenish scholar, the young Karathi who had lost his world, survivors from 7 different planets. "We asked them to fight," the scholar said. "We begged them to use their skills to save us. They warned us what it would mean. We didn't listen. We can't blame them now for being exactly what we needed them to be." Thralxis looked at Park with what might have been sadness in his compound eyes. "What happens now, Ambassador? How do we move forward from this?" Park was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "You make a choice. You can try to restrict humanity, to control us, to make sure we never become dangerous again. But that won't work. You can't unknow what you've learned. You can't unsee what you've seen." He gestured to the refugees standing in the gallery. "Or you can accept that humanity is exactly what we've always told you we are. We're not naturally peaceful. We're not incapable of violence. We're a species that spent 10,000 years learning every possible way to kill, and then spent 2 centuries trying desperately to be something better. We succeed at that most days. We failed spectacularly for 3 months. And we'll go back to succeeding again because that's what we choose." "And if another threat emerges?" Vexrin asked. "If the galaxy needs humanity's warriors again?" "Then we'll make the same choice we made this time," Park said quietly. "We'll do what needs to be done. We'll carry the guilt. We'll be ashamed of how good we are at it. And then we'll go back to choosing peace. Every single day, knowing that peace is only possible because we're capable of war." Captain Sujin Huang addressed a group of young alien cadets who had requested to learn from humanity's military academies. They sat in neat rows, their faces showing a mixture of fear and fascination. "You want to learn how humans fight," Huang said, pacing in front of them. "I'm going to tell you the truth. You don't. You really don't. Learning to fight like humans means learning to make choices that will haunt you forever. It means learning that sometimes saving 73% means accepting 27% will die. It means learning to calculate acceptable losses and live with those calculations for the rest of your life." She stopped and looked at them each in turn. "But if you're determined to learn, then learn this. We don't celebrate our victories. We mourn them. Every battle won is a reminder of what we're capable of. Every enemy defeated is a mark of our shame. We're good at war because we had to be. You never should have to be." In her ancient chambers, Velmora updated the archives one final time. Her tentacles moved across the holographic interface, writing words that would survive for millennia. "The humans were right to hide their nature," she recorded. "Not because they were ashamed of being weak, but because they were ashamed of being strong. Some species evolved to build great cities, some to compose beautiful art, some to unravel the mysteries of the universe. Humans evolved to survive, and survival made them the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." She paused, her 4 eyes reflecting the soft glow of the archives. "They saved us. They terrified us. They did both with equal efficiency. And now they're going back to their museums and their monuments, back to pretending to be peaceful, back to choosing every day to be something better than what they are. The old tales were not myths. They were not exaggerations. They were warnings and promises both. Pray you never need them to remember who they really are. But if you do, know that they will come. They will fight. They will win. And they will hate themselves for how easy it was." Across human space, the transformation reversed itself. Soldiers became civilians. Weapons went back into storage. Ships that had hunted the swarm across 3 systems returned to their berths in military museums, their crews disbanding to return to their ordinary lives. Earth looked peaceful again, beautiful, safe. But every species in the galaxy now knew the truth. Humanity's peace was a choice they made every single day, a choice they could unmake if necessary, a choice that cost them more than anyone else would ever fully understand. The refugees went home to rebuild their shattered worlds. The human soldiers went home to rebuild their shattered souls. The galaxy went back to the business of civilization, carrying forward with the knowledge that sometimes civilization required barbarism to survive. And humanity went back to hoping that the galaxy would never need to see their true face again. But they kept the weapons maintained, just in case. Some lessons, after all, are too important to forget.